Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Some companies build revenue, others buy it through amazing talent. That's why today I'm going to talk with Jeremy Jenson of Encore Search. That company knows talent and they know revenue. And so they're talking to companies about how the right rainmakers, the right executives, even the right Aqua hires will transform a business overnight and make talent acquisition a strategic differentiator. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list. Hey, Jeremy Jenson, welcome to the leaders list.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Man, I'll tell you, this is going to be great because you're one of those companies that, when some organizations start out, you start as a small company, you're great at what you do, but then you get stuck in, the founder bottleneck, or you kind of stay in that stagnant role. And I think it's really impressive what Encore Search has done, that you have evolved into that next level. And that's really why I wanted to have you on that and the fact that everybody's struggling with talent, especially in this new AI age. And how do I find the right talent, attract the right talent? So I'm thrilled to have you here just to share some of the things that you've learned.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, embarrassingly, I'm one of those industries that does really, really well whenever there's market volatility for talent. And so I think there's a tremendous amount of unknowns, right? And then we'd like to be a resource for our clients to educate them on what the landscape looks like with regards to AI and people and revenue growth through people acquisition.
Yeah, super interesting as well. So we'll get into that more, but I want to get a little bit more on your background and your experience and how'd you start Encore? Why did you start it? And just tell me about the origin story there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeremy Jenson, I'm 41. I'm a father of 3 young kids. I've got 3 young boys, 13, 11, and 9. I'm recently engaged. And so that's taking up a lot of my social life right now. We love to travel. We love to do adventures and things of that nature. I'm a huge pickleball player. I'm not any good, but I'm part owner in Honcho Pickleball League. And
nice. Stay out of the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. There's like a meme of like, oh, you play pickleball 7 days a week. You must be really good. And then it's like that little boy that's like crying and he's like, but I'm decent. But yeah, I started my first business way back in 2010 at 25. And that company was an email marketing and lead generation business called Market Share Solutions. I did that for a couple of years, and I was making about 250 grand in my mid 20s, but I couldn't scale. I ran out of hours in the day, right? And I think there's a lot of young entrepreneurs that are in that same scenario where they think that just because they're making money that they're successful. But if you don't have the freedom and flexibility to be a present husband or a present father or pursue your creative pursuits, right? Then are you really truly successful? And fortunately, in late 2012, I took a look at my client base and I said, man, half my clients are recruiting companies and they're making all this money from me generating all these leads. I'm in the wrong business. And so I shut down my first company, Market Share Solutions, and I started Encore Search Partners in January of 2013. And so that's how we got started. Friends and family were the first people that we hired. And then, word kind of got out, through our lead generation efforts on what we did. And the rest is history. You fast forward almost 13 years, we've been able to position ourselves as the largest privately held executive search firm in the city of Houston. And we're the premier by revenue #1 search firm in the wealth management industry nationwide. And so those are 2 very proud accomplishments that I love to brag about publicly.
Well, you deserve to brag about it because that's a huge accomplishment. And what's really interesting about that, Jeremy, is you started understanding how to build a sales and marketing engine.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the core elements that when we talk to companies at various growth stages, sooner or later, they have to move beyond their one salesperson or a
Yep.
co-founder or somebody who is responsible for that. So it's great that you had that as a core, to your business.
Absolutely. And truth be told, Bryon, it's evolved over the years. How we generated leads back in 2014 is very different on how we generated leads in 2020 and very different than how we do it in 2025.
I think talk a little bit about that, because I think that is one of the things that people don't understand, that even if you build the engine, you can't just put gas in it. You got to tune the engine consistently.
Absolutely. And you've got to have the right strategy, not just the right execution, right? You talk about salespeople. Well, salespeople can be very highly effective if you have the right go-to-market strategy. You understand your unique selling point. You understand your target client profile. You've got data. You've got scripts. And now it's just becomes a manpower, component of how we put our message in front of the right buyers. But one thing that I've found over the years is that I wanted to look at what everybody else was doing, and then I just wanted to do the opposite. That's exactly how we've been able to grow, right? So when I flash back to 2014, a lot of people were making cold calls. They were doing drop buys and trying to develop relationships in person. And then we really were early adopters of email marketing platforms, right? And so we did a lot of client acquisition through email marketing. Well, then what happened was all these people started to do email marketing. And so then now I wasn't effective, right? Because spam filters started to get more sophisticated, right? People, buyers started to get really bogged down in their email inbox. And so what we started to do was—
When Jeremy, I would bet that you were empirical about that. And so you could start to see the decline.
Absolutely.
And that's the big issue, right? A lot of people, they'll do one tactic, they hammer the tactic, but they aren't really understanding what are the leading indicators that tell them that tactic is waning or falling apart. So I'm sure you saw it like that.
Well, data always tells the truth. I think quite often there's businesses that are built around founders' intuition, right?
Yeah.
But with that being said, the ultimate goal of any small business owner should be to not even be needed, in the company, right? And so then when email marketing started to trail off, we started to be really early adopters of content marketing on social media way back in 2018, 2019. And I built up a large organic following, right? On certain social media platforms, LinkedIn be the most prominent one. Started to do a lot of client acquisition through there. And then what happened was everybody else started to do that, right? Yeah. And so now you look at all these companies that are using AI, offshoring, they're using virtual assistants, and things of that nature, Philippines making cold calls. Now what we're doing is we're hiring Americans, making them coming to the office, giving them salary, benefits, PTO, 401k, and developing relationships with prospective clients the old-fashioned way by making cold calls. It's crazy how it's all come full circle, but I look at what is everyone else doing, and I'm going to do something different, because it gets really noisy whenever you're just doing what everyone else is doing.
Get a zig when they zag. I love all the constant evolution there. So you've been doing this for like you said, like 13 years, right? We're coming up on that.
Yep.
And so today, tell me a little bit about the growth stage that Encore is in. How would you describe that?
Yeah. So, in 2017, we started implementing EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Yep. That gave us a tremendous amount of clarity around our mission, vision, values, right? Our quarterly and annual rocks. We identified what is our 1 year, 3 year, and 10-year vision. And so, when you look at who we are today in 2025, we have clarity around why we're in business, who we're doing business with, and then the areas, whether it's certain geo markets or certain practice areas that we want to grow into, right? So we actually understand what is our mission, okay? And so now it just becomes a matter of sharing our marketing collateral, right? Focusing less on lead generation and focusing more on demand generation, because we understand what our identity is. we know what our unique selling point is. We know the problem that we solve in the market. And so now it's a matter of everybody hearing our story. That way they can get excited about working for us. And so we've migrated away from maybe doing a little bit of this push marketing to doing a little bit of what I call pull marketing.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And so the pull marketing, obviously you're attracting, right? You become the magnet and you become someone that people look to for advice versus you going to them and hammering
Yep,
away.
exactly.
So it's interesting. I mean, that's the classic, what's that line? Are you a hunter or a fisherman?
Absolutely.
And you know, like a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm a hunter,"
Yep.
because they like it, right? There's an aggressive nature to it.
Mhm.
But the reality is, if you're a fisherman, how do you attract the right individuals with
Mhm.
the right bait? And a large part of that is living the right kind of life, you know,
You're
so that
absolutely
people
right.
want to know you.
Uh,
But
you,
you have to make that conscious decision, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to catch, bass if you're using bait that's used for catfish, right?
Right.
And so you've got to have the right boat, you've got to be in the right location on the right lake, right?
Yeah.
You've got to have that right, sonar GPS to go out and find them, and then you've got to have the right bait. But there's so many people that, they think that it's just a rod and reel, right? And then when it doesn't work, they throw it away and they get a different rod and reel, and then they get a different rod and reel, and it may in fact be the bait, or it may in
Yeah.
fact be the location. And so there's so many different variables that contribute to whether or not a small business is successful. And one of the things that I've found, to answer your question a different way, in where we're at in this stage or this evolution of Encore Search Partners, is we're really embracing our own authentic brand and our own authentic voice, right? I think I used to be so scared about how people would receive or perceive me in the market, because I wanted everybody to like me. And then I realized that 20% of people are just not going to like me. And so what I need to do is just continue to show up as my true authentic self. And then the 80 people that kind of vibed with it, the relationship and the bond would become stronger. Right. And so not needing to be a people pleaser for 100%, because if social media has taught me anything, it doesn't matter what you post, you're always going to be haters. I could write a $100,000 donation check on Friday. We're going to the Ronald McDonald House Gala, right? With my friend Ryan Herbst. If I post that I write a donation check, somebody's going to be like, "Oh, look at this guy showing off. Oh, he's only doing it for marketing purposes." It's like, dude, you can't win them all, man. And so really just showing up and being your true authentic self, I think, is what separates a lot of the entrepreneurs from some of the people that are trying to make it.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. If you are at a stage now where it seems like you guys are trying to become a someone in the position that people will look to, from an operations perspective, you mentioned using EOS. I know that you have also had a chief of staff. You've brought in the right kind of individuals. Do you feel like you've reached a point where you can feel to quote Jim Collins, that flywheel effect?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like we're certainly at the infancy stages of that.
Okay.
We're certainly not humming, right? We're not Amazon, that's doing, got a $2.5 billion or $1 trillion market cap. With that being said, I think a lot of our people that we have in place are just extensions of my own thought process on, what are the key initiatives that need to be implemented. I would venture to say that we're not going to be at that true flywheel capability until it's information systems that are doing a lot of that, that tactical implementation, right? Because if I still require Scott to do this and Jacqueline to do this, and Casey to do this, and Jacob and Kelsey and Barish, then we're just a compilation of individual capabilities, right? But if I can say that this data system can do that, this marketing strategy can do that, right? This AI automation or system can accomplish this business process, that's whenever I've seen employers really hit that flywheel effect.
Man, I agree with you, Jeremy. I think it's the living in the gray zones is what I always talk about. The there are distinct functional needs, and you start to build out that leadership team, and then all of a sudden you recognize, hey, we're mature at this and we're really good at it. We can get better at this. But then the people who are capable of seeing in between that and moving beyond the silos, and sometimes it's systems,
Yes.
sometimes it is individuals. But the bottom line is that gray zone is a big difference, once you start to evolve past the obvious.
Absolutely. It's funny that we're talking about this because I came up with an analogy just now with the visual. So if we were like in a rowboat, right, in the beginning, people are using different size oars. Maybe they're in the wrong location of the rowboat. They don't have the rhythm down and they're kind of like fighting each other. Well, I would say we're still in that rowboat, but now we've got rhythm, right? But how do we get out of a rowboat and how do we get into a steamboat? That would be really, really nice. Yeah.
I was going to say, if I know you're building an engine in the garage and you're ready to replace that. Yeah.
And one day we're not going to be in a steamboat, right? We're going to be in a yacht and it's going to be incredible. And I'll have a big white beard, just like Bryon Morrison. And I'll be interviewing some other young entrepreneur on a podcast, asking him how he's going to get rich.
I love it, man. I have no doubt you will. You're already good in that space. Yeah. So, tell everybody about what is on your leaders list, right? So from a tactical perspective, we understand strategically where you're at and what you're trying to evolve into. What are the top things on your leaders list that you as the CEO are paying attention to right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to hear it in my business life or my personal life? I'm curious.
Let's go with your business life, because I know, like, from your personal life, you got a whole new set, but I think what's really interesting about that is that you're smart enough to recognize that you have to keep both top of mind.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's think about, like, our listeners or CEOs that are running SMBs. Yep. So let's talk about, like, what are you struggling with or what are you thinking about and paying attention to?
Yeah, great question. So since January of 2021, I've been working with an executive life coach. His name is Michael Anderson, and he's got a group called Heightened Leaders. And so I'll give you an example. So I was in Warsaw, Poland a couple of weeks ago with my fiance. That's actually where her family is from. And I was really stressed out because I was looking at the numbers of my team, their KPIs, and they were struggling with hitting their call volume. They were struggling with hitting their submittal volume, their client interviews. And I was processing this anxiety with my life coach. And, through processing that whole discovery, I realized that if I could solve the lead generation aspect at Encore Search Partners, if it didn't require me to be in my seat at the office using my manual processes to generate prospective client leads, if I could solve that with information systems, then, I wouldn't have that anxiety in Warsaw, Poland, right? And so one of the things that we've begun to implement, actually started about 9 months ago, whenever we started implementing a solution called Bullhorn for Salesforce, which was a new CRM and applicant tracking system that could leverage external API functionality with some really sophisticated automation and AI and texting capabilities, right? And then now that I had this ecosystem that my Microsoft Gemini, my Microsoft SharePoint, my Outlook, Excel, all of the different data sets could integrate it from an AI standpoint, now I could leverage technology to be the thing that generated leads for my business, right? And so it all started with, why am I anxious? Let me reverse engineer how I can solve that anxiety, because there's probably a lot of small business owners out there that are making a couple $1,000,000 a year. Well, hell, if they just invested $500,000 of that back into the business, they might find out that now their business capability is not 25 million. Now it's 100 million.
Yeah.
Because they invested in the right processes, systems, and technology. And so when you say what's on my leaders list, it's I am in the process of systematizing what my entire manual process has been capable of for the past 15 years. And guess what? Systems don't call in sick. Systems don't
Right.
ask for a raise. Systems don't give you their 2 weeks notice. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so
totally.
that's where we're at in the process of the Encore evolution.
So if you're evolving from operating the business to leading the business, it sounds like you're transforming the business today.
Absolutely. And with
Yeah.
with no intention to sell it,
Right.
with no, and I think that there's a common misconception that a lot of entrepreneurs want to exit. Well, guess what? If somebody wrote me a $20 million check for the company today, I don't think my lifestyle would change very much. I kind of like being the CEO of Encore Search Partners. I
Yeah.
like the pride that it gives me. I like, the respect in the community that it gets. I like that the social network that it creates, right? And I'm an influencer with other high-powered executives and business leaders. And so how can I focus more on creating positive emotions in my life and minimalizing the stress that my business creates? I think that's where I'm at on my leaders list.
I appreciate your candor about that. The fact that that you're attached to the business, but you also know what that affords you. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of people that I know who sold the company and assumed that people were going to line up outside their door and, consistently be knocking to say, how'd you do it? And tell me more. And there is that for a period of time. But then all of a sudden, it just sounds like this. You can just hear this sucking sound where, it's like it's empty. And that is a really hard thing to come to grips with. Whereas you're making a lot of money, you're happy, you are fulfilled. I believe the same thing. If you love what you do, you should, there's no reason to necessarily exit. However, you also want to build a company that's worth buying.
Absolutely.
To get to that level, you have to be somebody. I know you get calls all the time and field calls for acquisition. You just know you don't need it and don't want it, which puts you in that's a much better position than I got to get out of this.
Absolutely. So if we were Bitcoin, we're probably like Bitcoin in 2016, right? We're trading at, a $2,200 a coin. We know we're going to go to the moon and hit 7 figures, and I'm going to hold, baby. That's where I'm at right now with Encore Search Partners.
I love it. Well, and what do you think about there's a ton of change in the marketplace, right? We're thinking differently about our people and our staff. And so what gives you fear? What gives you concern about that? Anything?
I think that EOS and having those, weekly level 10 meetings, the monthly management meetings, and the quarterly executive offsites really allow us to get on the same page and give us a mechanism to identify and discuss and solve anything inside of the business that would ever inspire fear into any of our leaders. And so I would say that I'm not necessarily scared. Now, granted, is there a little bit of anxiety around, well, hey, recruiting attorneys is a big part of our business today, but that attorney that's got a $3 million book of business, if AI can disrupt his book of business and steal 2 million of that revenue that he generates, now he's only a $1 million attorney. Right. And so how is that going to affect my recruiting fee? Is there even going to be a demand to recruit that $3 million partner? Right. And so there's a little bit of fear and anxiety around is not only will how AI disrupt my industry, but how will AI disrupt my clients in the way that they generate revenue, right? Because we know that it's going to affect law firms, public accounting firms, wealth management institutions, right? Private equity, venture capital, et cetera.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me, like, what am I scared of today? I'm probably scared of my kids growing up to be shitheads, right?
Right.
That's definitely something that every single day I make sure that I put the processes and systems and accountability in place in order to make sure that they understand what is our family's mission, what is our vision, what are our core values, what are my boundaries, what are my non-negotiables, what are my fears and anxieties. I think if a lot of parents don't talk to their kids about stuff like that, right?
And I love that, Jeremy, because the business operating system, you've learned the power of that, right? When you were at an operating level of your business and you're different level, different focus, you recognize what a business operating system did. But bringing an operating system into your home makes a ton of sense. And the people that I know that are most successful, they do think about, what happens in the at the boardroom as well as the breakfast table, to quote a friend of mine, Clint Bruce.
Yep. Absolutely.
So tell me about, like one of the things that I would just point out to our listeners is, Jeremy, you made the conscious effort to focus on the business. And I know that that's an overused term, the on the business versus in the business. But the things that you are talking about, how do you put process in place? How do you build engines that can pick up some of the responsibility? How do you rethink how things are done consistently? Those are big strategic mindset changes. And that is definitely on the business. So I commend you for thinking through that and getting to that point.
Well, thank you very much. Absolutely.
So let's talk about now, all of the folks that are listening, they're running their businesses, they're building their leaders list. Talent is, going to be one of the subjects that you're thinking about, winning the talent wars. And I'm just curious, just give me the perspective you have on talent today and how Encore is helping companies go through the process of evaluating, finding, recruiting, and bringing on great talent.
Absolutely. Great question. So I would say that our core focus, if you were to look at our 10-year vision for the organization, is we want to be hyper focused on helping growing organizations get more top line revenue, right? And so we want to specialize in recruiting revenue generators. And so when you think about that, it's partners in a law firm, senior level associates that work on billable hours. It's, tax managers, tax principals, tax partners, wealth advisors at the senior vice president and vice president level, right? It's lead generators inside of all of those professional services firms, because as AI gets more sophisticated on capturing active candidates that are actively pursuing a new career opportunity, those individuals that are high performers that are getting exceed expectations performance reviews, they're not looking for a job. And so the way that we're safeguarding our business model is by hyper focusing on those high level revenue generators that aren't specifically looking. And so when you say, what is the problem that we solve for businesses that are trying to win the war on talent, right? Is if you employ sales executives, enterprise account executives, sales development reps, not necessarily putting so many eggs in one specific basket, because Jill has been here as our sales girl for the last 9 years, that you need to be constantly focused on bringing in new high level, high performing sales talent, because it keeps the legacy people honest, right? It keeps them hunting and less on farming. Right? It keeps them focused on bringing in new logos. And so we help our clients constantly bring in that new blood, whether it's people that bring in portable books of business, whether it's people that bring in centers of influence and referral partnerships, right? Whether it's people that bring in monthly recurring revenue capabilities, whether we help our clients commercialize new geo markets or practice areas. I'll give you an example. We work with an oil field services company that does about 250 million in certain aspects of artificial lift for oil and gas production, right? And so they might be really good at plunger lift and rod lift solutions. So if they come to us and say, hey, Jeremy, can you find us an executive VP to commercialize electrical submersible pumps? It's a different type of artificial lift. We already have the infrastructure. We already have the branding, the marketing collateral, the operations. This guy's relationships is going to help us bring in another $50 million in revenue. Do you think they give a shit about paying me my $75,000 recruiting fee?
You're right.
No, they're looking at the $50 million they're about to make next year.
Right.
So we help companies think creatively on how they can increase revenue through people acquisition.
So when you talk about finding these great revenue generators, they're naturally good at it, right? You have to have experienced this before where there's immediate tissue rejection. Like you bring this great player into the organization, and a friend of mine, Greg Stanley, gives an example of, he keeps buying houseplants, and when he brings the houseplants home, if they die, he goes, I'm either buying the wrong houseplant or the environment is wrong. So in those situations where the environment is wrong, and even if you look at it and you go, it's a good company, good place, but it's wrong for that individual, I know that's part of what you do. But how do you help them when you can just see that the environment's wrong? And even if you brought in the great talent, they're not going to succeed.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the short answer,
I asked that specifically because you
Yeah.
think about this with a 10-year view, right? You don't
Yeah.
look at it as like, I'm doing this quick transaction. So how do you help them?
Yeah. And so, truth be told, it is difficult to gauge, especially if they're a brand new client that we've never worked with. Are they the wrong environment? Right.
Yeah.
We tend to think of ourselves more as advisors and consultants and less as order takers. Right. So, if there's a managing partner or a CEO or an executive director that comes to us and they have a business challenge that they're trying to solve, if our recruiters are saying, hey, I think that your compensation structure is wrong, right? Hey, I think you're looking for the wrong type of demographic of person for this role. Hey, have you ever thought creatively about, modifying the role to focus on these aspects instead of these? Companies that are closed-minded, right, and not focused on continual improvement, quite often that's a huge red flag, right, for us to say, this might not necessarily be the best organization to work for, right? And I would love to say that we have the discipline and humility to tell that client, we don't want to recruit for you. But at the end of the day, if we are being open, honest, and transparent with the prospective candidates, maybe what the deficiencies are, then they can go through the interview process and determine whether or not they're perfectly okay with it. Because not every single company can be the greatest, culture, most profitable organization to work for. But as long as you're open, honest, and transparent about what they're getting into, what we do is we're headhunters. We're not culture builders. Yeah. And so sometimes the clients come to us and say, find me a culture builder. Well, hey, that's a super exciting search to work on, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the CEO and the shareholders need to be perfectly okay for that impending change management to occur.
Super interesting point about change management, right? And going through that process, because those big hires that you're talking about typically come with some sort of change, right? That's why you hire fantastic individuals like that. And there's a reason that they can generate incredible revenue and have followers, because they're good.
Yeah.
Right. That's a natural thing. So as you start thinking about, or actually, I wanted to ask you about one of the things that you guys do that I think is incredibly smart is at times you will go and do search for multiple parties and what I would refer to as an Aqua hire.
Yep.
So basically looking at small companies or operating units within a larger company. And I know that that's something you guys have been specializing in for a while. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you got into that mindset. And then, do people ask you for that? Or is that something that you've started saying, hey, listen, you should think differently about this?
No, that's a great question. And so I would definitely say both, right? And it's funny because I think we accidentally kind of got into the business of commercializing those practice areas. And maybe one of the first times we did it was when a regional law firm in Chicago came to us and said, hey, we've got a big client that just acquired another company in Omaha, Nebraska, and our lawyers need to be on the ground in Omaha, right? And so we are, we're having to send our people from Chicago. We're having to pay, per diems and cover their lodging. And a lot of our associates don't even want to do the work and they're not licensed in Nebraska. And so, Jeremy, can you go out and find a litigation team the managing partner and 2 associates in Omaha. And by the way, they're going to walk into a $2 million book of business that the firm already has. And so then we go to market and we say, hey, look, I've got a Chicago client. They're looking for a flag planter in Omaha. You, as the founding partner, are going to take over $2 million in billables, which is roughly about $500,000 in variable comp for yourself. Would you and your associates be interested in coming over? So you see how that's like a really cool sell, right? And so for that specific scenario, we just called all the firms in the local Omaha market, shared the story. Without us, the law firm wouldn't be able to capture, right, their $3 million in revenue that they brought over, in addition to the $2 million they were already doing in Omaha. So now they've got a $5 million office, a 3-person office, plus overhead and staff in Chicago supporting them. And they paid me a $325,000 recruiting fee to get those 3 individuals. And so whenever we did that, obviously I went to my executive team and I was like, bro, I want to do more of this stuff. Right? How can we do a case study? How can we do a white paper? How can we put this information in all of the law firm's hands and say, hey guys, if you're looking for flag planters to open up new offices for your law firm, we are the resource to do it. And so the reason why you knew that, Bryon, is when we talked 2 weeks ago, we had just moved a 9-person wealth management team from one broker dealer to another, and they brought over $5.4 million in revenue to the company. 9 people. So them paying us a $540,000 finder fee, that's a no-brainer for them.
Yeah. If you're thinking about it, is it always a situation or typically a situation where they're looking at a startup in another office location, like you were talking about, planting a flag?
Absolutely.
Or is it just coming into the organization and becoming another operating unit within it?
That's a great question. And there's 2 answers to that. I would probably say it's 50-50, right? But if I'm going to convince somebody, let's just say they're a senior vice president wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley. He's got a $2 million book of business and he's getting a 44% payout, right? So he's making $880,000 a year as a W-2 employee at Morgan Stanley. Well, that person may be able to leave his firm and go, start his own independent firm at Raymond James, where he owns the shop, right? It might be Jenson Wealth Management, an independent office of Raymond James Financial Services, right? Mm-hmm. And so now he's getting a 95% payout and he's just paying his little 5% franchise fee to Raymond James. But now he's on the hook for paying his rent, paying his marketing, paying his staff, paying his overhead, his insurance, right? All the different aspects. And so our recruiters need to be skilled enough to have the right technical acumen and business acumen to educate this advisor that he's going to increase his own personal net worth if he leaves this W-2 opportunity to start his own regional franchise. And so we do a lot of flag planters. We open up a lot of regional offices. The core commonality is it's companies that want to grow revenue, and you can't just post a fucking job ad on LinkedIn for a managing partner. You got to come to Encore Search Partners and we'll get it done.
I love it. So as you're thinking about, Aqua is it's one way to think about this that is well beyond, I got to put another person in the rowboat.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that is thinking about, I'm planting another engine on the back of this.
I need another boat.
Paddle on the steamboat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I love. That's a really smart consideration for scaling companies that are really consciously aware that they are going to grow and they've made that decision. As we're thinking about the talent wars and I'm trying to figure out how to win and compete, what are some immediate takeaways that you would say, if I want to change my mindset around talent?
Yes.
What are some of the 2 or 3 things that you would say, hey, stop listening.
Great question.
And go do this.
Focus on yourself, bro. That's what I'll say. And so I'll use an analogy. in 2020, I was recently divorced. I weighed 280 pounds, right? I was balding. And I wasn't living an active lifestyle or a healthy lifestyle, right? If I would have said, hey, I'm going to go out and find a wife right now, what I was qualified to acquire, right, would not be what I am qualified today. I lost 90 pounds. I got a hair transplant. I got on a skincare routine. I bought a nicer house. I started working with a life coach. I upgraded my wardrobe. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so you got to focus on yourself before you
Well,
go out and start thinking that you're going to get this high level fucking performer. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's just such a perfect example of, like you got to take care of, got to take care of yourself and get to
You got to
yourself,
take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
might be
which sounds
upgrading
really selfish, but it gives to others. And so there's two things there. One is it gives back. If you're a better person, you're giving back.
Yep.
And then, I also think it's interesting that you just looked at it from the right to win.
The right
do
to
I
win.
deserve
Like,
to
do
have
you even
somebody
deserve?
that I'm looking at?
Dude, you're
Kind of
you're a little crappy, regional. I'm just making some regional pest control company, right? You've got 8 employees. You're doing 2.5 million in revenue. You say that you want to 10x your business. Who the fuck wants to even go work for your little pest control business?
Yeah.
What is your unique selling point, right? Who is your target client profile? Do you have a definitive go-to-market strategy, right? What is your compensation structure? Do you see what I'm saying? Right? You got to be sexy enough to go get high performers if you want high performers. But everybody just wants high performers, and bro, you ain't sexy. Focus on getting sexy.
Okay, so number one, we're gonna get ourselves and our business sexy.
And you could do that by hiring an EOS implementer, a
Sure.
scaling up implementer, right? People that can come in and help you put in processes, systems, and accountability in order to be poised with the right framework in order to scale.
Yeah, I'll shamelessly plug, get a proxy in there so that you have somebody to work on the business.
And do you help companies do that, Bryon? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, proxy is all about being relentlessly focused on the business because
Absolutely.
you cannot pull yourself out of being in the business. That's the reason you're great at a certain scale. But when you move from that difference between operating a business to leading a business to transforming a business and to scaling a business, those are all distinct stages that require a CEO to act differently.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have somebody, a coach, you don't have somebody we just fundamentally believe it takes a person, you have to have somebody in the business working it with you, because sooner or later you do become the bottleneck.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is get some help and take care of yourself first. That's awesome advice.
And you know what's, so one of the first things that I'll say, you're saying get some help. That's like telling somebody who's overweight, you just need to get a personal trainer.
Right.
Well, before you do that, you have to actually be mentally prepared to get a personal trainer. And you have to be mentally prepared to put in the work. Because if you just want to get a personal trainer and you're expecting them to fucking make you fit, guess what, bro? You're the one that's got to show up and do the work.
I love it. But you also, using that metaphor, we have to also recognize that a lot of entrepreneurs, this is the first time they've developed a company. This is the first time they've gone through that process. So using that metaphor, at least getting a trainer has them say to themselves, are you mentally ready for this? Like if they get a good trainer, the trainer is going to talk to them about their mindset, not just their physical ability.
Yep.
And so the bottom line is, don't dream about it. Don't just think about it. Take action. Get somebody to help you.
You're absolutely right. And it's funny because I love that I pay my executive life coach so much money, right? If I were to look at what he charged me per hour, it would be astronomical. Yeah. But if it was cheap, I don't think I would take it as serious.
Yeah.
I don't, if it was just $165 an hour, personal trainer session that I could skip and just Venmo the guy, guess what? So, real change takes effort, intention, and it costs real money, right? So if you're ever thinking about using a headhunter to go out and find somebody to help you scale your business, be prepared to spend real money.
Absolutely. Okay. So take care of yourself. That's take care of yourself and get your business pretty and sexy.
Yeah. Sexy is the word I used.
I love sexy.
Yeah.
That's great. Any other recommendations of go do this first?
EOS, processes, systems, and accountability, right? A huge transformative for our organization. If you're looking for an integrator to implement EOS in your business, we also place integrators. Sometimes, if you want to grow revenue and you're thinking about what type of processes or systems you can implement in order to do so, sometimes it's just as easy as poaching a top salesperson or revenue generator from your direct competitor, and we can help you with that as well.
I love it, man. Jeremy, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing the journey that you've been on with Encore, but also for yourself. I mean, you've clearly gone through that transformation, and so it's been great to be able to learn from you on the leaders list.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.